Howdy, we are back for yet another episode. Thanks again for tuning in. I always joke about me someday writing a book. I actually have a writer that has agreed to write the book because I actually am a terrible writer. And she has agreed to write this book. Now, this book is not going to be probably what most of you think it will be about. It's going to be about the clients, the stories, the experiences that I have been able to have just by being a trainer. It's been an incredible ride over the past 30 years. And I think some of these stories are worth telling in a book. So stay tuned for that. But before I do that, the podcast is here upon us. And so I thought I would today share a couple stories about some of the funniest stories and some of the coolest stories. I mean, I have so many stories to share about the different types of clients. Of course, I'm not going to be naming names, although some of them probably wouldn't even mind. But I've always been a trainer that has respected people's privacies. I see on Instagram, Facebook profiles, celebrity trainer. And I just, before I get started, I thought I would quickly touch upon that. I don't know why being a celebrity trainer makes you a better trainer. I think it's because you're just in the right place at the right time, in the right city at the right time. It's been very difficult living in Calgary. I obviously don't live in Calgary anymore, but I lived in Calgary for my whole career, and training celebrities was a little bit more difficult than, for example, if I lived in Los Angeles or New York. But I really feel that saying that you're a celebrity trainer is pretty cool, and I have trained quite a few of them, but it's not what makes me the trainer that I am. In fact, I think it's opposite. I think it is the everyday average people that I train, that I've trained over the last several years, that makes me one of the best trainers. It's the experiences of not training people that are important, and I'm doing that in air quotes for those of you who are just listening. It really doesn't matter. But yeah, some of these stories do involve some higher profile people, very well-known people. A couple of them, I may share their names. I may not. I'm approaching this podcast as very casual, very ad lib. I don't want to be sitting here writing down notes. I want to sit here and be as genuine and as authentic as I possibly can. And just to speak out of my soul and my heart. And instead of thinking about talking so regimented about certain things, I just want to sit here in front of my laptop and share my stories and be as real and just chaotic as I usually am. So I just thought I'd quickly talk about that because yes, training people who are higher profile is really cool and really neat and adds, I guess, some credibility to a trainer's reputation, but I don't feel that it should at all. So anyway, okay, so I'm going to tell a couple of stories and see how the time goes, and then I'll either share more stories in another podcast, or I may just wait for the book because I do have some really fun stories. I'm going to share the first story is like the one that is the oldest experience that I have. Is probably within the first year of me becoming a trainer. And I think that when we first start our career as a trainer, and if you're any of those trainers that are actually listening, if you're just starting out, one of the key pieces of advice that I need to give to you is that your goal when you first start out as a trainer is going to be kicking the living shit out of your client. That is what you're going to probably think is what they want and what they think they pay for. And really, yes, of course, you want to make sure that they're going to be trained harder typically than what they will do on their own, obviously. That is a big component of why people hire a trainer. But I also think it's very important to make sure that as a trainer, you're educating your clients more than torturing them during that session. Make them leave feeling like they've learned something throughout that session. It's very, very important. And killing and torturing clients, making them feel like they have gotten every single penny in that session there is an element of that for sure. But I think more importantly, it's important to educate and teach your clients why you're doing certain things. And torturing them is certainly not something that needs to be included. And this story sort of leads into that. I started working in a restaurant in Calgary. I probably will keep the name of the restaurant just as private, because some of you who know me quite well will figure out who this individual is, and I don't know for sure if he would want me to share his information with everyone. But he was the owner of this restaurant, and once he found out that I was a trainer, he hired me. And at this time, obviously being brand new, I trained at the Talisman Center. I think at the time it was called Talisman Center. Now, for those of you who, this is the first podcast that you've listened to, the Talisman Center was what it was named when I worked there. It is one of the biggest youth facilities in North America. It is now called the Repsol Center. It changed names a few times, but at the time that I trained, it was the Talisman Center. That is what I know it. Actually, I think when I first started, it was Lindsay Park Sports Center, and then it was Talisman Center about 5 years into my career. So the names changed a few times, but if I say the Lindsay Park Sports Center, most of you who live in Calgary will know. And for those of you who don't live in Calgary, it is now called the Repsol Center, which is an incredible facility. In my opinion, probably still the best facility to work out in, or to work in, just because of the demographic type of people that go there, the space, the environment. It's just incredible. So he hired me. We started training. Because I was a brand new trainer and he was a man, I was a little intimidated. He was the owner of the restaurant I just started working at. I kicked the living shit out of him, like to put it mildly. He was not out of shape. He was definitely, not a person that was needing me to coddle him or start from the beginning. I knew enough at that point in my career that he, what I could and shouldn't be doing with him, but still I went in way too strong. Big lifts, big heavy lifts, lots of compound movements, very little rest interval, sweating profusely, not a lot of visiting. He seemed really happy. After the sessions, he would leave, he would come back. We trained a couple times a week. Actually, I think at the beginning we trained, now keep in mind, this was a long time ago. Probably we trained 3 times a week minimum, if I can remember this person's personality. And then after about a month or so, we went into more of a once or twice a week thing. But typically clients like at the beginning anyway to start pretty consistently, because they're not comfortable doing things on their own until they learn the routine, exercise form, etc. So the second session came around, and the very first question always I ask to this day is, how did you feel after your last workout? Because that's going to predict how I train that client for the next session. His answer was great, no problems. I was a bit surprised, so we carried on, and the torture continued. We just continued to go on. He would leave, he would come back. I would say, how do you feel? No problems. Really, I was just like, wow, this guy must be, eating really, really well, getting his regular massage therapy sessions in, doing his recovery work, because I'm shocked that, and the more that I would get the feedback that he wasn't really feeling the workouts, the more almost frustrated I would get, because I really, as a trainer, and to this day, I really believe that you should wake up within the next 24 to 48 hours after training, lifting, not exercise, but a workout lifting session where you're using weights in your hand or machines, strength training machines, and you should feel it within 24 to 48 hours. Now, I'm not saying you need to feel like you cannot walk for 3 days after a leg day, or, pick up your child. That is not what I'm talking about. But to wake up and feel like something has happened. I'm sitting here in my chair, for those of you who are just listening, moving my body. Yeah, I can tell I definitely did a shoulder workout yesterday. It is not something that I can feel ongoing, but definitely when I sit here and move my body, I can definitely tell that there were muscles that were worked through a certain threshold. When you strength train, just to get in, just off topic here, and I can tell I'm already going to be able to tell a couple stories. But again, I just feel like I'm going to talk as I feel that I need to. But when you're strength training, just in case some of you don't understand what the whole idea is and what happens when you're strength training, is that you're tearing and breaking down tiny little microfilaments in the muscle. So there's the muscle, and then inside the muscle are little like spindles, and then if you break that down even more, there's like microscopic little fibers in those spindles. And if you break those little tiny microscopic spindles or fibers through your thresholds, whether that's tempo, weight, increased intensity, lots of different modes or methods can create this. You'll feel it. You'll feel that change the next day within 24 to 40 hours typically. Sometimes it takes a few days, especially big muscles like the leg day. Sometimes it takes a couple of days to really feel what's happening or what has happened in that workout. And so in my practice of training, I've always considered that as something important in strength training. If you are not feeling the workouts, then I believe that a mode needs to change. Not always does it need to be weight, though. We really need to make sure that our form is the most important thing. So a lot of people will go to increased weight or assume that they need to increase their weight, and typically it is not actually the dumbbells or machine weight that is creating the lack of progress. It usually has more to do with awareness of your movements, concentration. And that is just from my experiences. When I train with someone and they're not concentrating or they're talking to me during a lift, I know I'm not focusing on my movement. I'm just not going to get the same type of intensity. And the same thing goes for when I train my clients. If I'm in the middle of talking to them or they're talking to me in the middle of their set, they are definitely not going to be getting the same effectiveness as if we were both quiet, concentrating. And that's why trainers count. We're not counting for the client because we don't think they can count for themselves. We're counting because it keeps the client focused. It keeps them on track. It also keeps them slow because, well, in my opinion, I can't speak for all trainers, but it will slow people down. So it's not that we're counting for the client. When I say, okay, we're doing 10, 9, 8, and they do it with me. They're not doing it ahead of me because they're going to want to go fast. It slows them down because tempo is also a really important mode. And maybe I'll get more into that in another podcast, but I think there's a lot to be said about learning how your body is moving and how you're going to be getting the most out of your lifts through those training. And it's not necessarily weight. So that is why I usually ask clients if they're feeling the workouts. And if a client keeps coming back to me and saying that they're fine, like literally, that's what he would say. Fine. Felt nothing. I would think, especially at the beginning of my career, what is going on with me? What am I doing wrong? The workouts got harder and harder and harder and harder. And the feedback was the same. I'm fine. Nothing. After a couple of months, when he finally started getting a little more comfortable with who I was as a person, I wasn't just this trainer. I was an actual human being. Sometimes it takes a while for people to really separate the difference between who they are as a profession, who they are as a person. He finally was able to, after a couple of months, be honest with me. He said to me, Tish, I am going to be honest with you. I have done 16, 18 sessions with you now. It's taken us about 2 months. I have not been able to get in and out of my car the same way. I have not been able to wash my hair. My wife literally has been washing my hair for me for the last 8 weeks. I can barely feed myself. His words exactly. And obviously he's exaggerating. He definitely could feed himself. But it was funny because it was a huge learning experience for me. Because it taught me that probably men were going to be a little bit more difficult in reading, and them being completely honest with how they were doing, especially me being a female trainer. But it also taught me to make sure that I was communicating effectively why why it's so important to communicate honesty to your trainer. And so through that experience, and it makes me chuckle because obviously I can't tell the story, is this guy was super funny. I loved training him, and just the description after a couple of months of being comfortable and open enough to say, I literally have not been able to move for the last 8 weeks. And the descriptions that he was telling me, it made me laugh, and it was a great experience for me. And needless to say, he didn't hire me back. He just said, I've really hated all the 8 weeks with you. I've not enjoyed it at all. And I'm not coming back. And, you know, he was joking, but he was also very sincere. And it was because he wasn't completely honest with me. Had he come to me and said, I was pretty stiff, obviously, as any trainer, it doesn't matter how new or how long you've been doing this, you are definitely going to back it up, take it back a notch. If a client comes to you and says they were quite sore, but because he kept telling me that he was fine, the intensities just kept coming. So I lost him as a client. I, blame myself, but I also blame him for that. So that was story 1. Story 2 actually is more about the experiences and opportunities I was given because of training a certain individual. And I'm pretty sure that this person won't mind me sharing his name, just because it's all positive stuff and I'm very proud of him. I met Sheldon Kennedy in a spin class about, 7 or 8 years ago now. It was a while ago. We were in spin and I was there with a client. At this time, I was still obviously face-to-face training. And Sheldon was sitting beside me, and he knew my client. She introduced, and after the class, he approached me and said, I have not been diligent in my strength training. I would love to sit down and have a quick coffee with you and see if we are a match and perhaps you could help me. I do have a gym in my home. And at this time, I was doing mobile business, so it ended up being perfect. So I trained Sheldon for many years, consistently for 3 to 4 days a week for 5 or 6 years until I moved here to Kelowna. I loved training him. He was awesome. I mean, training professional athletes, which I trained a ton of, and train even, when they're out of their sport, is a different ball game. I couldn't train professional athletes every day, ongoing, but a couple a week was so fun. They're very intense. It's just different. So each client that I trained, I was a different person. So I'm still me, but my approach and the way I trained that client completely was 100% different from client to client. And that is another thing. If you're just a brand new trainer listening, you really do have to adjust your approaches and who you are for each client. Not be a different person, but your approach and the way you handle each client needs to be different, because you, although are going to train certain niche, you're going to just attract a certain niche. There are going to be, even in that niche, different personalities, different intensities, and different days. Sometimes they're going to show up and say, I'm just not into it today. And that will be your job to get them into that mindset. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But you also need to make sure that you're modifying how you approach the specific clients and those individuals, depending on how their energy is, how they're feeling, etc. So it's very, very important. There's a lot to training. There's so much more to it than showing up and customizing and programming, and it takes so much more than that. The connection and the ability to read people and change your way of handling each personality on that specific day is a gift. It doesn't happen. It doesn't not all trainers have that gift. So, and you won't know that until you start. You'll get better at it as you go, I promise. And if you don't, you definitely will need to change careers ASAP, because connecting and establishing good relationships and communication skills with people is going to be one of the most important things that you will need to be able to do as a professional trainer. Anyways, so I did love training him. Very intense, very funny, loved to joke around, but really did like to work out. And we never really, his goal was just to stay healthy. He was in his 40s. He, loved his food, still loves his food, but, portions obviously I could tell were too big, but he never really complained to me about his frustration or unhappiness with how he looked. It really, and not to say he looked ever out of shape. He always looked like he was in incredible shape, especially when he started incorporating weightlifting back into his life. Because he was just spinning, and although spinning is awesome and I love it, it is not strength training. It doesn't change the shape of your body. So as soon as we got him back into consistent lifts 3 times a week, even in his mid 40s, his body really, like we laughed because during the flood, we had a huge flood in Calgary many, many years ago, but someone in Calgary wrote a book, and Sheldon's condo was flooded because it was right on the water. And there was a picture of him in the book, pointing to the water and everything. And we were looking at that picture one day, and he said, "Look at the difference in how I look." And the only thing really that had changed is incorporated the strength training component, because he is someone that needs to sweat and work out like a maniac almost every single day. That is just his happy place. The sweat, the intensity, that's what fuels his mental wellness. And he's been very open and honest about all of that. He would every Christmas write me a thank you or a Christmas card, and always inside the Christmas card was, "Thank you, Tish, for keeping me mentally healthy." And that was always the message. And so he always needed that, but what we just could not believe is his transformation and the look of how much more athletic and strong he looked again. So I was really happy to see the changes, and obviously he was too. But our main focus was just mental wellness, getting in, working out, until he was asked to compete in the Battle of the Blades hockey competition, I think you call it. It's like Dancing with the Stars, but it's, instead of dancing with stars, you're skating and competing, doing your figure skating on ice with, I think most of them were ex-pro hockey players, and then their partners were ex-professional, I guess they're amateur figure skaters, like Olympic athletes. And it's the same kind of thing. They do their routine. They have coaches. They practice day in and day out. It was on TV. They wear the outfits, the really fancy outfits. They have the judges. They get eliminated. It's like the real deal. It's super fun. So he got asked to do that a few years ago, and he agreed to do it, mostly because, of course, a huge opportunity for him to raise awareness and money to the many charities that he's involved with. And of course, we all know about those incredible charities. So it was more for him was just to bring more awareness and obviously raise some incredible amount of money for charities that he so positively believes in. So we did it. But the problem is it was on TV, and he had to wear these like figure skating type of outfits, which were, if you're at all carrying at all weight around the midsection, probably wouldn't look so good. So he said to me, "I think it's time that we, look at my nutrition." And I agreed. And I was excited about that because, he was carrying a little bit of extra weight. And he did always tell me about the pizzas that he would enjoy at his local He probably is going to be not very happy that I'm sharing this, but I'll get in trouble from him if I do. But anyways, these are all good stories that are great learning things for people listening. So Sheldon, if you're listening, that's why I'm sharing these stories. So anyway, a lot of times what happens with professional athletes is because their career, their job is all about exercising, staying in shape, and performing in their sport. That's their job. They spend their entire day. First, it's practice. If you're a hockey player, you're on the ice, you're skating, you're doing your drills. That's a few hours on the ice every day. Then you go home and you have your lunch, and then you do your dry land training. It is intense. You do your strength training, and then some nights you go back to the rink and you're playing a 3-hour game. So there's constant movement. And a lot of times what happens with these professional athletes is they eat, obviously, but when they stop doing the 8 hours of prep each day, because that's their job, they continue to eat the same amount of food because their stomach is used to it, their bodies are used to it, their minds are used to it. It is their routine. It is their habit to just eat that amount of food. And what happens typically with a lot of professional athletes is they get a little overweight. Now, Sheldon was never overweight. He just carried a little, like he was so active and so like he's constantly on the go that there's no way in hell he would ever have a weight issue. But because we were going to be on TV, and listen to me, I talk like I was going to be there, but I invest so much in all of my clients. So I do really feel like I become them. But because he was going to be on TV and wearing figure skating outfits, we kind of thought we should probably lean him out a bit. So I just started inputting what he was telling me into MyFitnessPal. And the one thing he said is, I love, the local, I don't really want to name names because I don't want to get in trouble, but it was like the big sandwiches that are really long, like a foot long, I think I can call, like, what are those, sub sandwiches, and, not the healthiest meats, not a lot of vegetables, just, so we put it in the MyFitnessPal and it was over 2,000 calories. And that was something that was being ingested on a daily basis. So he said to me, I probably should stop eating the foot long one. And I was like, yeah, you definitely need to do that. So we cut it. He still loved it. I said, you don't have to stop eating it. We just need to give you the 6-inch or the half a portion. No problem. So we made small adjustments. He was still able to eat the things that he enjoyed because for the most part, they're healthy. His partner was a very healthy cook. So it's not like he was always out eating bad foods. It just sometimes when he was out and about during the day, how it's like. You go, especially all of my male clients, they were the worst for this. Then all of a sudden they're so hungry. They always grab like the worst things that are quick and filling and typically not always full of the most nutrients and vitamins, etc. High calorie foods. And so we just made small adjustments, nothing crazy. And I said, I'd really like for you to continue this type of eating into like forever. This is healthier for you. Well, little by little, the weight came off. And of course, everything contributed. He was on the rink on the ice with his figure skating coach twice, for 2 hours a day. We started training every single day. So instead of 3 times a week, we were lifting 5 days a week. He was managing his nutrition better. So there was a lot of factors that made an impact on this change. But wow, I think he ended up losing close to 30 pounds. Don't quote me on that, but it was significant. I couldn't believe it. And what also I could not believe, nor could he, is how much more efficient he was in the weight room. I mean, he was moving his body again, he said, like he was 20. I couldn't believe it. The pull-ups, no problem. In fact, I wanted to add weight to his pull-ups. I wasn't spotting him anymore. Obviously, with the weight loss, those were much easier. But just the way he moved, it was just so incredibly rewarding to see. So, and the opportunities that I had because I trained him obviously was I got to train an ex-professional athlete. But secondly, I got to go to some really fun events. He always invited me to the Cody Snyder's bull busting event, which was super cool. I got to sit in like the little celebrity place, and that's how I met Tara McCool. And it was really neat to kind of be sitting right there, like literally the bulls come right up to the fence, and you're getting the bull poop on you, and the saliva, like they like turn their head and all the spit just comes all, and you're getting it all over it. It sounds gross, but it is one of the most exciting things that I ever was able to experience. So he would always invite Neil and I, and we always got to go. It was so much fun. And then of course we got to go watch him in Ontario. Where was it? It's on the tip of my Hamilton. Never been to Hamilton, so we flew into Toronto, spent a night in Toronto, and then took a train into Hamilton, and we were able to watch him front row center. Don't cry, Tish. I was just so incredibly proud of him. He killed it. I think it was his second show, so he had done it once, I'm pretty sure, or was it his first one? I can't even remember if it was the first or second one, but it was definitely one of the very first times he had competed. But he just blew it out of the park. The crowd was cheering him on, clapping. I had I'm not going to think too much about it because I literally will start crying. It was one of the most rewarding things is to watch him do his thing. He looked absolutely like he was having so much fun. He ended up winning the Battle of the Blades that season. He was the oldest competitor by at least 10 years. And I truly do believe it's because of his charisma, energy, heart, but also he devoted so much. When he puts his mind to something, he is the most competitive person on the planet. And he's like, I am going to win this thing. And when he puts his mind to something, he does it, as I'm sure you have seen in his career. So that was a pretty cool experience as well. And it was sad. That was the one thing about moving to Kelowna, is some of the clients that I obviously had to walk away from. It made me pretty sad. I miss, the laughs and the joking and sometimes we'd get in little arguments too. He was like my big brother. He got to be, a bit of a protector of me, and he gave me a lot of good advice. He was a very smart person, and I'm very proud of him. So that was a pretty cool experience. And then let me quickly tell another fun story. So part of my business, as I mentioned in another podcast, is I love to, I had the ability, or I changed my career a few times, still trainer, but I changed how I trained. So the first 10 years I trained at Lindsay Park. Second decade of my training was more mobile. So I would literally get in my car, bring the odds and ends in my car. I had a truck at the time. Most of my clients didn't have fully equipped gyms. Some of them did, but a lot of them didn't. And I literally would show up with sometimes my BOSU, my suspension trainer, maybe a couple med balls, but really it was more functional bodyweight training. And it was the hardest training that I've ever done, not just for me, but for my clients. They worked way harder in those sessions that they did in the gym, just because it was more functional, more compound movements, and using your own body weight. I mean, some bodies are pretty heavy, and the machine really does assist you. So they're good. They're both good and bad, but really they were some of the hardest sessions that I would put my clients through, were those home sessions with very minimal equipment. And, but because my business changed for the second decade into more of a mobile business, I was able to, be in some incredibly beautiful homes, probably some of the nicest homes in Calgary, probably some of the nicest homes in Alberta. I trained some of the wealthiest people in the city. Training is expensive. It's not exactly, a $5 coffee. It is a huge financial investment to have a trainer that's had the experience that I do, the education that I do, to have them to train you, get in their car, drive you. All of that costs money. So I have to say, in the last few years of my mobile business, my clientele did shift a little bit just because of that, is because it gets expensive. But because of that, I was able to see some incredible homes. I mean, there's about 3 or 4 that are popping up in my head right now. And they were nice enough to take me through tours of their homes. I mean, the nice thing about training people in their homes is they're allowing you into some of their personal life. And so it becomes a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word. It's like, I know you're all listening and trying to tell me the word because you know what I'm trying to say, but of course I can't think of it. But intimate, that's the word I was looking for. It just feels more intimate when you're in someone's home, in their space. And so, yeah, my clientele really changed. So there was a couple of years where I was spending a lot of time in Mount Royal. I had a couple of clients out in Bearspaw and Elbow Valley, like some of these homes that were just incredibly beautiful. And some of the gyms, I was just completely, like one of the clients I had, her gym was just incredibly beautiful. Brick walls, mirrors surround, 12-foot ceilings in the gym, the lighting. It was they were both very into fitness, and her husband was an ex-pro football player. So obviously they had really wanted to invest in the gym because they were still very, very active. But wow, so envious of their gym. So anyway, as a result of training some of these wealthier clients, I was given tons of opportunity. One client invited me to a dinner one night. And so she invited Neil and I to go. So of course we went. And we showed up, and the head chef of Mercado was preparing the dinner. There was a sommelier there from, I can't remember, but a very well-known sommelier, pouring the wine per meal. And there was pairings with each meal. It was like a 6-course meal. And there was 4 other couples at this table. So she had brought in flowers, like the house was, the bouquets, the flowers. It was, I did not know that that's what I was walking into, but wow, what a night. When we got in our car and left, Neil said, because I'm not into wine like he is. I mean, I like drinking it, but I don't understand anything about it. Just give me a glass of wine, I'm happy. But he, of course, being the collector that he is, was like, Tish, we probably drank over $5,000 worth of wine tonight. And okay, I should also clarify, we didn't drive. We got in a cab because we were definitely not driving after that night. And I knew like some of the names that we were drinking, the champagne, and not bubbles. We were drinking champagne. I wish I should have written down some of the names of some of the wine and the champagne and the dessert wines that we were drinking, but it was quite the night and quite the experience. And every single person in that room was so amazing. Lots of laughs, lots of stories. It's different it is different. It is not any better or any worse being around people that have that kind of money. We're talking private plane money. It is just different. But everyone was just super nice, very, very down to earth. And it was an incredible night. So that was a really cool experience. And the other kind of fun experience that kind of is sitting in my head right now that I'll share, because I am obviously running out of the time. My producer has said, Tish, try to, keep it to like 30 minutes. And I'm like struggling with the 30 minutes. So I'll tell this one more quick story, even though I really wanted to tell one more. I'll leave that last one maybe for another podcast. Was I got to fly in a private jet to Montreal to watch Britney Spears with my client and two of her best buddies, which was pretty cool, I have to say. First time ever on a private jet. I think I've been on a jet 3 times. All 3 times were because of clients taking me, which is pretty cool. Yes, being a trainer can be pretty cool. There's some awesome opportunities. When you make an impact, an impression, and an imprint on people's lives for the better, they become very appreciative of what you have done for them. And I don't want to take credit for that. They always say, thank you, you've changed my life. And I always reverse that and say, this is absolutely has nothing to do with me. You were the one that made the commitment to make the improvements in your life. I show up, I tell you what to do, but you have done the hard work. I always say that to clients. Don't give your trainer all of the credit. You have to give yourself, and vice versa. Don't blame your trainer if you haven't got the results, because it also is not their fault. When clients used to do a consultation, I always would sit down with the client before I would agree to train them, because you don't really want to be committed to anyone too crazy. You can handle some crazy, but you can't handle too much crazy, and vice versa. Sometimes clients would say, well, they never did, but I also didn't want clients to be stuck with me for a certain amount of time if they didn't like my personality. So I think consultations are also extremely important before you agree to sit down or not sit down, stand up, work out, but invest in a trainer. I think that's very, very important. So anyways, I got to fly on some private jets. This time it was just me by myself with my client and a couple of her friends. We got in a plane. We drank, again, champagne, and flew to Montreal. And then when I got to Montreal, I didn't just have a hotel room. We stayed in the fanciest hotel in Montreal. I don't remember what it's called. But not only did we have our own rooms, we didn't even share rooms, but I was given my own room. It was not just a room. It was a suite. It was huge. I didn't even know what to do with that room. And not only did I have my own space, but I also was given and you're not going to see this if you're listening, but a gift basket that was like this big, if you can see it. I'm holding up my hands and making like a big circle. It was a huge gift basket, and it was full with wine, champagne again. They were big champagne drinkers. Caviar, I'm not even lying, cashews, chocolates that were so pretty. I didn't even want to eat them. I did, but I didn't want to because they were just beautiful. I mean, this gift basket was full of the fanciest, nicest things that I have ever seen. It was beautiful. I was so overwhelmed by the generosity of what they had done. So then we had a couple of hours just to get ready. Then we were taken out for a beautiful dinner. Again, never paid for a single thing. And then after dinner, we went to the Britney Spears concert. We had our own suite with our own servers. Again, we drank the fanciest of everything. It was incredible. The next day, we went shopping. I didn't do any shopping. I was, again, pretty young in my career, had no money at all. And so I was just loving life, sitting in Holt Renfrew, watching these girls buy, t-shirts that were $750. It was awesome. It was definitely a different experience to be around people, that have that kind of money, because it's clearly way out of something that I, ever had experienced before. Super young. Like, was I even in my 30s? No, I was still in my 20s. So it was just an incredible experience sitting there thinking, wow, like this is really a fun thing. And how cool is this opportunity? So there are a couple of stories that I wanted to share. First one was just a funny story. The second and third one were more about some pretty cool experience that I've been able to have since being a trainer. I want these podcasts to be about learning, but also because the feedback I've gotten so far from the first couple of episodes is just, I do have so much to share, not just my expertise and my knowledge, but just stories. And I think sometimes it's refreshing to listen to a podcast from a trainer that's not, giving you just a bunch of information all the time. So hopefully you appreciated some of those stories. I do have a ton. So that book someday will come out. It's just a matter of me doing it. So first things first, let's finish these podcasts, get these going. Please enjoy the rest of your evening or day. If you're listening to this now, I really do appreciate you spending the time to listen to these. Until then, make sure that you give someone and tell someone that you love them and that they're important to you. Words go a really, really, really long way these days. And I look forward to sharing more with you in the upcoming podcast.